Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, Internet. We are back and I'm excited like always. And I'm excited because I speak to such interesting people here at Legacy. And today we're greatly honored and I want to welcome my guest, Rolene Marks. And she came to our attention when Andrew Whittaker, our presenter, said to me, Koos, you should listen to this woman. She has this broadcast she does on YouTube now and then. And from there on, she became quite famous, actually. And she's talking about the issues in Israel with Gaza, all those type of things. And she also happens to be an expert on Zionism. Now, I found out in the last 2 months that there are two words in the English language which people seem to abuse almost like an F word. And the first one is Jew. I call you a Jew. I don't always mean it nicely. In fact, I would even make a little hook-nose thing there, which I think is very anti-Semitic. You do that in my presence, I'll murder you. Let me be honest. And then secondly, the second word they like to throw around, these mainstream liars, is the word Zionist. And they make it a curse word. And I thought to myself, I know history, I wrote many books. And I know that Zionism, many famous people like Winston Churchill was proud to say, look, I'm a Zionist. And yet today, it seems to me, it is like, man, if I want to insult you, it's almost like this new lot in South Africa start calling people apartheid regime or something, that is the ultimate insult. But that created curiosity in me, and I thought to myself, let me ask Rolene. Rolene, firstly, welcome here. Can you give us a little bit of a background where you come from as much as you can? And then I will ask you, what is a Zionist and why is it seen as such a horrible thing? Well, it's not horrible, but I'll leave that for you to explain to us.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm Rolene Marks. I am a freelance journalist, and I also wear a lot of different hats. I am the head of public diplomacy for World WITA, which I do as a volunteer. And I'm also the national spokesperson for the South African Zionist Federation, which I also do as a volunteer. So, especially speaking to military professionals, if I can't serve my country in the army, I will serve volunteering where I can. I am a broadcast and print journalist, and I live in Modi'in in the center of Israel. And I'm glad that we are speaking today. Today is the 7th of February. It marks exactly 4 months to the day of what we call a Black Sabbath, when 3,000 Hamas terrorists infiltrated by land, sea, and air Israeli territory, coming into our southern communities, taking over military bases, coming into peaceful kibbutzim, the vanguard of the peace movement in Israel, small towns, and slaughtering people. It is an event unprecedented in Israeli history, and if we could compare it to anything, we call it Israel's 9/11. Our 7/10 is comparable to 9/11. And on that day, these terrorists committed atrocities that are beyond the remit of human comprehension. They burnt people alive. They mutilated people. They tortured families. They wholesale slaughtered anybody they could find: Jew, Christian, Muslim, foreign national, animal, baby, whole families, grandparents. They came in and committed wholesale slaughter. They raped women and young girls. They took over 250 innocent people hostage into Gaza. When the news started to break, we heard from a father, Thomas Hand, who didn't know where his daughter is, and he said, I pray to God she's dead, because to be kidnapped would be worse than anything you could imagine. Do you know what they do to people inside Gaza? He subsequently found out that she was kidnapped, and she was one of the hostages that we thank God every day was released. But today is a very, very difficult day for Israelis. Every single one of us remembers very clearly where we were that Black Sabbath. I remember waking up early to feed my cat, and my phone just went berserk with rocket alerts. And what many people don't realize is that we've been living with rockets for decades, especially our southern communities who have lived with barrage after barrage after barrage. And Israel's haters will say that they are homemade rockets. These are not just homemade rockets. These are agents of destruction. They are fired from within their civilian population into our civilian population, a double war crime, with the intention to kill, and they cause very, very real and significant damage. And as that day unfolded, we realized that this was no example of the past where we've had a flare-up of rockets. We have our Iron Domes, thank goodness, our air defense systems that keep us safe, and we'll carry on as usual. It didn't stop. From where I am in the center of Israel, Modi'in, I hear the booms all the way from Rishon LeZion, Palmachim on the coast, all the way through to Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem, north of Tel Aviv, and of course in my city of Modi'in. And to hear those air raid sirens is an absolutely terrifying sound. You know exactly that the intention coming in is the intention to slaughter you, to kill you. And as the day unfolded, we started to see the images which we couldn't believe were real, of elderly people standing at a bus stop in the town of Sderot, a town I visit often, slaughtered. The images of Shani Luk, a young German who was dancing at the Peace Festival on the border with Gaza, along with 340 others who were murdered out of the thousands that were there to dance for peace, to celebrate peace, to try and manifest peace, and hope that those on the other side of the fence would manifest peace as well. We saw her broken body with a hole in the back of her head on the back of a pickup truck being kicked and spat on by civilians from the Gaza Strip and paraded like a trophy. We saw Naama Levi, who is still held captive in the Gaza Strip, dragged by her hair, the seat of her pants bloodied. And we knew then that the horrific crime of rape had been committed against her and possibly other Israeli women and girls. And we found out that some of the most horrific incidents of gender-based violence against Israeli women and girls, regardless of age, and some of the males, had been committed by these terrorists, these barbarians. I won't say the word animals, because animals don't do this to each other. This was depravity and barbarism on a level that we have not seen before. And by the end of the day, Israel was a country at war. And if you have lived in a country through a time of war, and we are now 4 months with it, you know that it permeates every aspect of your life. It governs everything. And Israelis who are still very, very deep in our trauma, in our mourning, we're not at PTSD yet, guys. We are still very much in the trauma phase, but we know how to mobilize quickly. Reservists, whether they were called up or volunteered, started to pour into the country, even from overseas, and Israelis mobilized. We each found our something to do. In my case, it is fighting the war in the media battlefield, a very, very difficult battlefield. But in that case, every single one of us mobilized very quickly, whether it was packing boxes for soldiers or helping those evacuated, because we do have several 100,000 internal refugees in Israel. who have been evacuated from their towns and communities in the north, as we have exchanges of fire with another Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, or in the south on what we call the Otif, the Gaza envelope communities, communities which I've been to since that horrific day, and I'm still these months later trying to internalize, trying to process the emotions and the levels of destruction that I have seen.
It seems to me that there is like a psychological war against you going on. But before that, let me just ask you again, why is it that Zionism is such a hateful word these days? That it seems to have gone from something which is noble to find a homeland for Jews which was scattered around. I think it was called the diaspora or something. And to get them back into the fold where they can live in peace, because there were pogroms. Do I say that word correctly? There were attacks
and we called the 7th of October pogrom. It was a pogrom, the worst incident against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. So you were right. So let's unpack your question. Let's first look at the issue of psychological warfare, because Hamas, when their terrorists came in, they meticulously, despite the many people who still deny this, they meticulously recorded their atrocities for two reasons. One, to boast to the world, and the other reason was to terrify Israelis, to show Israelis. They uploaded themselves slaughtering elderly people on their Facebook pages, on the elderly people's Facebook pages. One young Israeli family found out their grandmother had been executed because they received a message on WhatsApp to open her Facebook page, and they watched live as this elderly woman was slaughtered in front of them. Some people received messages on their WhatsApp from Hamas saying, "Look what I'm doing to your loved one." So it was absolute psychological warfare as well. Psychological warfare, which is still ongoing, because from time to time we get these videos that Hamas released of the hostages, which we refuse to share, refuse to broadcast here, because it is psychological torment and torture. And it's done through the prolonging of negotiations for our hostages. It's done by the drip, drip, drip of the hostages. And Hamas plays psychological warfare with the world, because their end game, they know that they cannot defeat Israel militarily. We are one of the strongest armies in the world, with precise weaponry, with a moral code. So they know that the one way to wreak havoc emotionally with Israelis and with ordinary citizens who are gullible enough to fall for the motivations of an internationally recognized terror entity, Hamas, is that they know that as big a body count they possibly can get, the better it is for their cause. And people fall for it, especially young, supposedly educated, what we call Gen Zers, or very, very left-leaning people. The images of babies in Gaza is devastating to everyone. But as we have heard, not just from Israelis, because we know more than ever exactly what we're dealing with on the other side of the border, but from Hamas leaders themselves, Sinwar, Khaled Mashal on Saudi television, saying quite openly, we're happy to sacrifice millions of our civilians. That is psychological warfare, not just waged against Israelis who don't want to see civilian casualties, or Palestinians because they don't want to die, but also it's waged against the world, because it's playing with your emotions and your psychology. And it absolutely astounds me that Hamas can throw out numbers like 27,000, whatever they want to throw out, and the world just eats it up. Yes, we do have media outlets who say now the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health, but Hamas know that Israel will not compete with these kind of horrific images by showing our dead. So they are waging psychological warfare, not just against us, but against you as well. Let's also now unpack the issue of Zionism. You mentioned earlier that Churchill was a famous Zionist. Martin Luther King was a famous Zionist. And I'm going to say something very controversial here. Nelson Mandela was a Zionist. Now, I know that there are many out there who say Nelson Mandela said we won't be free until the Palestinian people are free. He did say that. But there's another part to that quote as well, where he said that he could not imagine an Israel without safe and secure borders. And he said, as much as we realize the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, we also recognize that Zionism is the Jewish people's right to self-determination. And simply put, that is what it is. Nobody put it better than Martin Luther King when he said that, simply put, Zionism is the yearning of the Jewish people to return to their ancestral homeland. And what many people don't realize is that Jews are indigenous to this land. Before there was a Palestine, which was a term coined by the Romans to break that Jewish connection to Judea, the land where Jews come from. They renamed it Palestine. And funny enough, the Arabs who then colonized this area in the years after that were not known as Palestinians. The term Palestinian and the Palestinian movement as we know it today only came about in 1964, decades after the State of Israel was founded in 1948. So the modern Zionist movement was the Jewish people's yearning to return to our ancestral homeland. And after enduring the pogroms, which you spoke about, the Holocaust, which was the darkest hour, not just in the history of Jewish people, but in the history of mankind, the extermination of 3/4 of the world's Jews, we returned to the land of Israel. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition what was then called British Mandate Palestine, because the territory had been governed by the Romans, then the Ottomans, and eventually the British. The area was partitioned into various parts. Transjordan became Jordan, Iraq, Syria, all came out of that. And the area that is so hotly contested today, Israel-Palestine, was partitioned into two parts. One part for the Jews, much smaller than the part for the Arabs. The Arab leadership at the time declared war on the fledgling Jewish state. And as you military experts know, in war, you win territory and you lose territory. And the fledgling Jewish army, which was really essentially put together with sticky tape and glue, managed to defeat the combined Arab armies. And, you know, often I'm asked today, what's it going to take for there to be some kind of settlement to the dispute? And when I go on debate and I hear, but 75 years ago, we can't go back 75 years ago. Nobody has a time machine that effective. But what I do want to start hearing from Palestinians is our leaders made a mistake 75 years ago. We're not going to get all this territory back. How do we start moving forward? So Zionism essentially is our return to the land, the establishment of the state of Israel, the right for the state of Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people to exist, is Zionism. If you believe that Jews have a right to exist and that Israel has a right to exist, you are a Zionist. You don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. There are many Christian Zionists and there are many Muslim Zionists, which is very, very important. In our Declaration of Independence, which is the backbone of this country, Our then first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, declares, he says, the land of Israel and the state of Israel is open to the return of the diaspora, the ingathering of the exiles, and we call on our Arab citizens to be an equal part of this country and help build this country. And today we have 20% of our population that is Arab, and following the events of the 7th of October, where Arabs were also murdered, mutilated, raped, and kidnapped. And they very, very firmly defend our country in our defense forces and serve in all echelons, including the government. So Zionism is the right of Israel to exist. It's the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. It comes in many forms. I mean, you have, excuse me, you have physical Zionism, farming the land, the kibbutzim, greening the desert, which apparently is now a racist thing to say. I don't understand how greening a desert is racist, but it's 2024, and you can identify as a cat if you want to, but this is where we are. There is political Zionism, which is, you know, working to bringing people, working to work to for the rights of the state of Israel. There's Zionist outreach going into communities around the world, as we do, especially in times of humanitarian disasters, and lending a hand. That's doing Zionism. So Zionism today has become another ism to attack Jews. It's not politically correct, although I don't know, in the last 4 months it's changed. You can't say I hate Jews, but what you can say that's politically correct is I hate Zionists. You can't politically correctly attack Jews, but you can attack the Jewish state. You can attack the brand of the Jewish people, which is our nation state. And anti-Zionists, and by the way, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionists will tell you that it's not, but I don't think they actually have a right to determine what is anti-Semitic and what is not anti-Semitic. Anti-Zionism is basically saying that all the nations in the world, including the Palestinians, have a right to a state of their own, have a right to self-determination, except the Jewish people. It's as simply put as that. Anti-Zionists know that you cannot defeat Israel militarily. We're too strong. But what you can do is you can wage what we call lawfare, legal warfare, like we've seen with South Africa, the ICJ, and attack Israel's right to defend herself, Israel's right to exist. You can label slurs like apartheid state, intentionally knowing that if you compare Israel to apartheid South Africa, you separate Israel from the family of nations, which was done to South Africa during the years of apartheid. So when we talk about anti-Zionist warfare, legal warfare, labeling with slurs, creating that movement called BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Movement, to try and do exactly that. Boycott Israel, divest your money from Israel, apply sanctions to Israel. That is the warfare employed by anti-Zionists. And today, as you so correctly said, it's become the ultimate insult to say to somebody, but you're a Zionist. And don't for 1 second, I mean, I sit here, I'm wearing my map of Israel, I'm wearing my Magen David, my Star of David. And don't think for 1 second calling me a Zionist is an insult, because I'm a proud Jew. I am a proud Zionist. I believe in my country, its right to exist, and its absolute inalienable moral and ethical right to defend itself against entities who seek to destroy her. So my favorite thing to do to anti-Zionists out there is to ask them, what is a Zionist? And you know what? None of them can tell you what a Zionist is correctly. Slurs like colonialist, racist, apartheid state is that is not an argument. That is a soundbite. And when you can make your argument against us not using slogans and sound bites, then bring it on.
Now, if an Arab state says that the Jewish state Israel does not have a right to exist, and they say that it is in some grondwet, what do you call it, constitutions, what do they mean by that? Do they mean that all Jews must be killed and we go back to the year 2000 years ago, something like that? No Jews, all dead?
Well, that is a very, very good point. Because today on campuses around the world, in the streets of major capitals around the world, and even in South Africa, we saw the ANC Secretary General putting on his Twitter handle a couple of months ago, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, we call it a call for genocide, because what does that mean? And it means exactly as you've said, that between the river to the sea, which most anti-Zionists cannot tell you which river and which sea. I mean, I've seen some very, very creative explanations from the Black Sea to the Nile River. We have a piece of land smaller than the Kruger National Park, and this is what you want. I mean, to me, it's absolutely incomprehensible that out of 56 Muslim states, all ethno-nationalist states, by the way, Islamic republics of, Islamic State of, Islamic Kingdom of, to other countries that are either Christian majority, Hindu majority, and that's absolutely fine. The one tiny, minute Jewish state that you can't even find on a map triggers so much outrage around the world. You've got to ask people, why are you so triggered by that? So when we talk about the slogan "From the river to the sea," it means exactly what you asked, that we don't have a right to exist. Where do we all go? So the river is, for those of you out there who don't know geography, the Jordan River, and the sea is the Mediterranean Sea. And that distance is a tiny amount of kilometers. Now, saying that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means it will be free of Jews. What that means to the buildings, to the people, to everything that we've built. And in 75 years, we have built a thriving state that is a leader in so many different fields: water technology, agriculture, biotech, green tech, cybersecurity, medicine, humanitarian relief. We're now looking at AI. Any area where we can lead the world, we're looking at ways to grow. We have moved from becoming the kibbutz nation to the startup nation. We're now the innovation nation. You see throughout this war our incredible technology in keeping us safe and mitigating civilian casualties as much as humanly possible. You use Israeli technology throughout your day in so many different ways without even realizing it. It's actually quite funny, because when people say we are going to we're going to boycott Israel, go mad, baby. You know, if you want to live in 1945, you do you. We're going to carry on innovating and contributing to the world. So that's exactly what it means. It's saying you don't have a right to exist. Out of all the nations in the world, you don't have a right to exist.
Yes, you don't, because you're a Jew. That's what they say.
Because you're a Jew. Because you're a Jew. And then they still have the cheek to tell you anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. You know, anti-Semitism is the oldest, most irrational hatred in the world. And it metastasizes like a cancer throughout generations. You know, in medieval days, it was blood libels and accusations of deicide. And throughout the generations, we've heard, you know, Jews dominate the world. I love how we should dominate the world. We'd get better media coverage. We'd do away with all this hatred. So, shocker, everybody, we don't control the world. Through the Nazi era, we were subhuman, not human. And now it's taken on that iteration that the Jew has no right to be a member of the family of nations by having a country of our own, and therefore we need to eradicate that. And Natan Sharansky, who is a human rights icon, he was imprisoned in a Russian gulag for being Jewish, and he incidentally was a good friend of Nelson Mandela. He's one of the world's greatest human rights icons, a prisoner of conscience. He says you can define anti-Semitism by 3 Ds: demonization, demonizing the Jews; hook nose, those horrible caricatures, controlling everything, the octopus, and today demonizing the Jewish state. You can delegitimize. Jews have no right to, an Israeli state has no right to. We need to delegitimize Israel with accusations of apartheid, genocide, etc., etc. And double standards. Double standards, and we see, those double standards at play at the United Nations, in various institutions. South Africa is the great employer of double standards at the moment, with the case at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, because a country that allows for the calling of murders of white farmers and turns a blind eye to genocides on the African continent, and says nothing about the Fulani militia slaughtering Christians in Nigeria, and stays silent about Palestinians slaughtered in Yarmouk in Syria, and is big buddies with Mr. Putin in Russia as he mows through Ukraine, and is friends with China, who has imprisoned over 1 million Uyghur Muslims for re-education. And of course is now big mates with Iran, that routinely executes anybody who stands up to the regime, and has repeatedly called for the genocide and the eradication of the Jewish state. That is probably the most prime example of a double standard as there is.
I was in the police for about 6 years. And in the police, you see a lot of horrible things, especially in those days. And one of the things we dealt with was rape.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for an 18-year-old constable to deal with a woman who has been abused like that. Man, you don't even know what the woman is, to be honest, at that stage in your life. And suddenly you see these things. And I want to say to people, yeah, unless you've seen it, unless you've seen the blood and you've seen this horribleness with your own eyes, you can't really understand what big a crime it is. That's why there used to be a death penalty for it in many states, because it's a deliberate crime. Look, if we get into an argument, and I'm also an attorney, and I flick my mood and I slap you, that is instinctive, man. It is not deliberate. I wasn't planning on doing that. But when you grab a woman and you have to hold her down and you have to sort of undress her, and it's a very strange fellow who can get excited about that. I don't want to get graphic, but there's something mentally wrong with you. The same as a fellow who will get himself excited with a child. I mean, there's something mentally not there with you. Now, the question I have for you here is, do you in Israel live with a fear of such things can happen to you at any time, and do you hope for the best? How do you deal with this as a woman, as a female in a country like that?
I think it's an excellent question, because I am part, and I sit on the executive, as I said earlier, of World Wheat. So we are a women's organization that lobbies for the status of women and looks after, the people of the state of Israel. And today we found ourselves on the front line of being the voice of Israeli women to international women's organizations and feminists. I mean, some of the biggest feminists, Angelina Jolie, Meghan Markle, all these celebrities who play the feminist card, and especially after the Me Too movement and all of this, there is such a global consciousness about gender-based violence. Now, rape on a daily basis is not something I worry about in Israel. I mean, I walk around with my bag open, and I don't worry about my safety at all in Israel. But in the wake of the 7th of October, we saw something different. For the first time in our conflict with the Palestinians, rape was used as a weapon of war against Israeli women and girls. There is overwhelming evidence for the deniers out there. There is overwhelming evidence. We have survivors. They are understandably petrified to share their stories publicly. They might never share their stories publicly. We have eyewitnesses. We have the testimony of Hamas terrorists interrogated, who very happily said, we were given orders. And in their words, to dirty Israeli women and children, because they were asked, why specifically rape? We were told to dirty Israeli women and children. We have the eyewitness testimonies of the first responders who came in, and their prime job is not to gather evidence and to photograph. Their prime job was to take the bodies for dignified burial as per religious reasons. But they've all testified. And here I have to really pay tribute to our soldiers, to the first responders from Zakai, United Hatzalah, Magin David Adom, the police who came in and were the first eyewitnesses to atrocity. I heard personal account of a woman who was found, and I'm going to get very graphic here, and it might upset sensitive viewers, a woman who was found with her pants pulled down, her hands bound, and a live grenade in her hand. I heard live accounts from soldiers who came in, found a pregnant woman cut open, the baby taken out. We don't know if the baby was killed in front of her, and a grenade placed in her stomach. We've heard the accounts of the women whose job it is to prepare the bodies of women for burial, and every single one of them had the same consistent story. Those women were raped to the point that their pelvises were shattered, that their legs couldn't be closed for burial, that their underwear was bloodied. There are reports some women were shot in their genitals, nails found in their genitals. Their faces were contorted in agony. When I think of the last moments of my people on the 7th of October, it is agony. We know that soldiers found little girls who had been raped. The accounts of babies beheaded are corroborated by forensic pathologists and first responders. We know from the eyewitness testimonies from the hostages released that some of the hostages, female and male, have been raped. Our greatest fear right now is for those females that have been raped, if they are pregnant or not. Time is running out, and I know there are various opinions on the issue of abortion. And whatever your opinion is, I think we all can agree that this is a very, very specialized circumstance. But this is the situation that we found ourselves in. And obscenely, it has been denied by many, including feminists, including women's organizations. For a Jewish woman, for an Israeli woman, bearing in mind it wasn't just Jewish women who were violated, the message that I have received loud and clear is me too unless you're a Jew. Believe all women except Israeli women. And it is absolutely grotesque. I mean, I'm sitting here, I see a news alert coming in that the UN Special Representative Pramila Patton for crimes of sexual violence has concluded her visit to Israel. And she said she cannot sleep after what she has seen and what she has heard. She watched the 47-minute gathered footage from the Hamas GoPros and body cams and the security footage. She's heard the eyewitness testimony from people who saw our women gang raped, shot in the head, and continue to be raped. Necrophilia, it's appalling. It's abominable. And she said she couldn't sit in her office and do nothing. Now, the United Nations UN Women took nearly 2 months to respond, and they responded with that they were alarmed at reports of crimes of sexual violence. I was not alarmed. I was appalled, disgusted, absolutely devastated and shattered at crimes of sexual violence. And it's the first time in this conflict that we do have those reports of rape as a weapon of war. It is absolutely horrific to endure as a Jewish woman. But as a member of a women's organization, I will continue along with my colleagues to be the voice of these women and make sure that these women's organization, far and wide, from UN Women to the International Alliance of Women, to every single feminist who goes out there and says, bring back our girls and me too, and believe all women, you will continue to hear from me because we will not be silent. And I want to thank the men out there, because very often we hear these accusations against men, patriarchy, blah, 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 where you, women, feminists, have been silent. Do you know who has been standing with Israeli women? Men. Men have been speaking for Israeli women, not you, men.
It is so where rape is used as a weapon of war. It's normally indicative of genocide. We've seen it across history. You see the same pattern all the time. But this is against a Muslim tradition, isn't it? A good Muslim will never do such things. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right. And many, in fact, there are some clips of our Bedouin soldiers, who have said, Hamas, in Arabic, we are coming for you. You raped our women. This is not Islam. You raped our women. We are coming for you. And we've heard a message loud and clear from Israel's Arab community to burn people alive, to kidnap women and children, to slaughter the elderly, to rape women is a crime against Islam. And Hamas has bastardized this. This does not sit well with many in the Muslim world. And thank you to our many, many friends from our Abrahamic brothers and sisters who have spoken out against this. And thank you to many organizations who have spoken out against this. Muslim organizations, they've spoken out. Feminists, where are you? And just on that subject, for an Israeli woman, what this message has given us is that for the future victims of sexual violence in a time of war, organizations that have failed to speak out have failed their mandate, and they have also given a license to terror organizations and others to use rape as a weapon of war against women in a time of conflict.
It saddens me greatly to hear these things, because I spoke to a very senior officer in your foreign intelligence unit, and he was a very wise man, very experienced, of course, much older than me. And he said to me, courage is like a wallet full of money. And then one day, that money runs out. And that is where real courage begins. And I always thought to myself, what words of wisdom is this? Really enjoyed it. And then I asked him, I said, sir, do you think peace is possible in your country. And he said, just leave us alone and we'll have peace. Is that still true?
That is an excellent question, because right now we are so deep in our trauma and deep in our pain that the issue of peace, even though we are a stubborn people and we eventually find in us our hope for peace, right now those conversations are not possible. What many people may not be aware of is after that first wave of Hamas terrorists came through on that Saturday morning, it was followed by many civilians from the Gaza Strip, including children and including the elderly. And we know from the intelligence gathered and from the testimonies of Palestinians who were arrested and questioned that they intended to come through, that they were given the intelligence. They were given the intelligence by Palestinian workers who worked with the kibbutzim, who worked on the kibbutzim and worked in the communities, you know, before the 7th of October, when incidentally, for those calling for a ceasefire, there was a ceasefire, which Hamas violated. Over 400,000 Palestinians would come through Erez crossing every single day, that crossing which has now been absolutely destroyed and was presented in evidence at the ICJ. 400,000 plus workers used to come into Israel. And unfortunately, Israelis right now don't want Palestinians in Israel. We can't trust them. If you can kill the people that were on the vanguard of peace, people like Vivian Silva, who would put you in her car every week and take you for your cancer treatment, how do we trust you? Is peace possible? I like to think so, because as the very wise military official said, you know, we're stubborn and we have that hope for peace. And I think that hope for peace is our ultimate resilience, because Hamas do not want peace. Terror organizations do not want peace. It is a big belief that they committed these atrocities on the 7th of October because we're on the precipice of signing a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is massive. And because we have built these enduring peace treaties and relations with our Abrahamic brothers, we very much are a people that want to be left alone and left in peace so that we can build peace. So while this is early days, I think let's revisit that question maybe in a couple of months and see if the mood of the people of Israel has changed, and we're ready to have those difficult conversations, those difficult but important conversations.
Well, I can tell you, people out here, Rolene is definitely going to come back. I mean, she's going to help also with Major Grain, and we're going to still talk a lot. But I have one last question to you. Have ever, in the history of Israel, of a Jewish state, have ever the IDF of the Jewish people, the Israelis, stormed across a border somewhere, raped and killed and murdered and did what happened on 7 October? Have that ever happened?
Absolutely not. And I say that with all conviction, because I know with every conviction as an Israeli citizen, knowing that our army is not just some random guys that go out to fight. They are our husbands, our colleagues, our sons, our daughters, our mothers, our best friends, our lovers, our community members. We know them. We know the code of conduct that they carry in their pocket by which they operate by. And we know that they do everything in their power to ensure as few civilian casualties as possible. And we're actually hearing it from the Palestinians themselves, who have been saying, don't go, we don't want Hamas coming in. They're finding their courage to stand up against Hamas. I am proud of our army. I know without a shadow of a doubt, our army is not genocidal. On Friday, I heard from a bereaved father whose son fell in defense of his country in Gaza just last month. And out of 82 days, he had not fired a shot from his gun. He had not fired a single bullet, but he had helped Palestinian civilians. I am proud of our army. I am proud that our army enjoys the reputation as the most moral in the world, despite all the armchair opinionistas on social media. And Douglas Murray actually said it perfectly. When the issue of a proportionate response and military experts are better equipped to discuss exactly what a proportionate response is. He said, what do you call a proportionate response to these atrocities? Do you want Israelis, soldiers to go into Gaza and rape women and burn people alive and kidnap civilians and slaughter them and mutilate them? Because nobody's going to do that. That is not how we respond. We respond by making sure that we are in fulfillment of the laws of armed conflict. We make sure that we are in fulfillment of Toar HaNeshek, the purity of arms, which is our moral code. And we make sure that we respond as a democratic army does by having the apparatus, including our Supreme Court, the layers of legal apparatus, the military advocate general, our legal advisors, the Supreme Court, and we go in there knowing that we go with conviction, we go with morality, and we go with the utmost ethical consideration.
You know, if I say anything now, I'm going to spoil it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, Shalom. Am I allowed to say that to a woman?
You can say that to everybody.
Yeah,
I think
there's certain
everybody needs
greetings you can't say to a woman. I don't know. I'm not Jewish myself, so
I think that will be our lesson of the day, is to say shalom. Shalom to every Jew, shalom to every human, because shalom, it doesn't just mean hello or goodbye, it also means peace. And that is your wish, not just to say hello and I come in peace, but that is your wish upon every human, is shalom, is to have peace.
and that's in what we say to each other here at the end. Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.